This podcast is a Radio Mike original production. Head to radiomike.com.au to find out more. G'day guys, Mike here, and welcome to Mike Talks, the bonus Friday edition of my podcast that I sometimes do when I sometimes have time. This week is one of the times that I have time to do the podcast, and I am very, very honoured to say that my guest on this week's Mike Talks is Ryan Shelton, who, on a personal level, is a comedy idol of mine that I've really enjoyed with a lot of my friends over the years. He's you probably know him from his work on Rove. He did a segment called Investigationing and Philosophizationing. He was also a writer on Chris Lilly's first show, We Can Be Heroes. And he works a lot with Hamish and Andy and has appeared in most of their gap year shows. And currently, this year, he has been working on his own thing, which I call Ryan 11, because it's Ryan with 11 Ys, where every month, on the 11th of the month, he puts a piece of content out. And I've been really lucky to get to know Ryan over the past couple of years and work with him a little bit, as I've worked with Radio Karate, the production company he founded with Hamish and Andy and another guy, Tim Bartley. And can I just say that it has been an absolute pleasure working with Ryan. He is such a legend. He's one of the funniest guys I know. I love talking to him. And this chat is no different. He's also a really intelligent, reflective, and philosophical guy, which I think comes across a lot in this conversation. We did this over Skype. The internet connection at some points was a bit patchy, so you might hear that a little bit during this, but I've tried to edit around those bits pretty well. It was only a few moments, so not much has been lost from the essence of the chat. This is really good, and when I first started this podcast, one of the sort of silent goals I set was to maybe have Ryan on the show at some point, and now 2 years into the podcast running, that has happened. So thank you all. I hope you really enjoy this. You can support me by leaving a review for this pod, going to my website, radiomike.com.au, and buying a sticker pack for this pod to keep the lights running here at Radio Mike Productions. And follow me on Insta, radio.mike, and email the show anytime, radiomikepod@gmail.com. Finally, before we start, all of my podcasts and all of my content goes up on YouTube as full videos, so you can watch this chat with me and Ryan if you'd prefer to do that. But without further ado, let us go on to my chat with Ryan Shelton, one of the biggest legends in the industry and a really, really awesome dude. All right. Welcome to Mike Talks, the bonus Friday edition of my podcast, and first guest on the podcast to actually count me in. So this guest decided he was going to count me in to my own podcast to start. Yeah. I'm super excited to be talking to someone who I would actually go as far to say, Ryan, that if you didn't exist, this podcast would not exist. So Ryan Shelton, comedian and amazing writer, is my guest today. Welcome to Mike Talks, Ryan, and thanks for being here.
Mike, I'm blushing. That's so lovely. Oh, well, I am very, very, I don't really know what to say when you say something like that. So thank you for saying that. But I think the podcast would still exist, but thank you for saying that.
Well, man, I'll get all the lame stuff out of the way first. But cool. When I started this podcast, which was at the start of 2019, one of the main things that I was like one of the main goals of this podcast was hope one day maybe I could get Ryan Shelton on the podcast. And now we're here, and now I'm like, does the podcast end now? Like, do I keep doing it? Because we've achieved one of the main goals of the pod.
I reckon keep doing it. I reckon it could probably keep getting better, even after I'm on, believe it or
not. I know, it's hard to believe.
And you timed it well. Like, you swooped in on after I asked you a favor, and you were like, yep, I'll take that opportunity. You owe me one. You owe me to come on my show.
Yeah, and we might as well talk about that, because this year you've been doing I say it as Ryan 11, which is your thing where on the 11th of every month from February to December you have put out a piece of content, whether it's a video, audio, or whatever it might be. And it's just a really cool and pretty ambitious thing you've done this year. Tomorrow, today, because this goes out tomorrow, so today you put the last one out for the year. Can you just talk about like what spurred this idea and what made you want to do all this?
Well, for like a long time, so to go way back, I think, my dream when I was growing up wanting to be an actor or be a comedian or whatever I sort of said I wanted to be when I was a teenager, it always included me having my own TV show. Like somewhere down the line, it always included like the dream of, I'm the writer and star and creator of my own show. Like that was always the dream. I guess like everyone, anyone who wants to get into television, that's sort of,
I had
if
the
you're a
same dream.
performer, most people would, because that's sort of one of the obvious things that you can point to and go, when you don't know much about the industry, you can go like, oh, I want to be like Jerry Seinfeld, or I want to be like, you have your heroes. And I mean, mine was like one of mine was Sean McAuliffe. I'd look at Sean McAuliffe and I'd be like, oh my God, like his humor, his style, the shows he makes, the creativity he has, like all of that. I was just like, I just would love that. And so, I did a bunch of stuff and, worked with Hames and Andy and worked with a few other friends. And I was always working on really great and fun things that I really liked. But in my head, I think in the back of my head, I always felt like it was a means to an end, being like, well, I've got to do all this sort of stuff, but then at some point I'll be able to knuckle down, get my own show, and then I will have achieved success and extreme happiness or whatever it is that was in my head. And so then like I tried, like I got, I was on Rove for a couple of years, and that was incredible. And that was sort of the place where the freedom that we had there meant that I was able to kind of experiment and just try things, like heroin and shit like that. And it was like, oh, like, okay, yeah, don't like,
Cocaine, or like,
yeah,
did you
yeah,
skip straight to heroin?
yeah, like orgies and yeah, just to experiment with as many things.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
So
no,
it wasn't content experimentation. It was actually experimenting with drugs and
Mike,
uh,
Mike,
unprotected sex with lots of people.
I jest. It was experimenting creatively. That was a ruse.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
no,
right.
I was able to experiment like with all different, with I guess what my voice. Not that I ever sort of consciously thought what's my voice, but
Mhm.
just the pure act of having to make new segments every couple of weeks meant that I had to, I was forced into just trying things and taking risks, and that was where I was able to sort of figure out, oh, I like doing these sorts of jokes, and it was where I got to be like not exactly Sean McAuliffe, but sort of my take on Sean McAuliffe, I guess.
Mm.
And I think that's what I was sort of trying to do, even though I would never have said that out loud at the time. But looking
Yeah.
back on it now, that's what I was trying to do.
But I
Um,
will say, and sorry to interrupt, but like you do definitely, and I think you're right about like Rove being almost like a breakout thing for you, because Rove was such an institution for um people of my age, so people who are now like in their mid 20s. We were like between the ages of like 12 and 15 maybe when you were on Rove and H&A were on Rove and Husey and that team. And that was my favorite show. Like it
yeah,
was every week, and I used to say, like, that's what I want to do. I want to be on Rove. I want to do what they're doing on Rove. And there's so much I want to talk to you about here. Can we just take a quick detour and talk the Rove stuff, which
yeah, great.
predominantly went ideas investigationing and philosophizationing, which
Yeah.
is
Well, there was actually
is
one more. There was actually one that I did for maybe 2 weeks called Reports.
oh
There,
yes.
there was,
I'm
you know,
Ryan Shelton, reporting for Rive. I mean
arrive.
Rove.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, and that's like to that point of like trying things. When I first started on Rove, the only reason they gave me a shot was because on the pilot that me and Hamish and Andy made, and Tim Bartley, who we work with at Radio Karate as well, the pilot that we made at Channel 7, like maybe a year or two before that, included this idea called the Key Journal hat, which was like this studio-based thing where I was at the desk and Hames and Andy were interviewing me, and I was presenting like this sort of product that I didn't, invented, and it was called the Key Journal hat. And the pilot, didn't get picked up or anything, but a few good things came from it. One being this thing, the Key Journal hat, because when we were on Rove, Hames and Andy were already doing like a couple of segments on Rove, and and you know, I was keen. I was writing, I think. Like we'd done real stories. We'd done real stories already with roving. And so I was already in the office and I was in the writer's room for Rove. And I think I must have said, I can't, I mean, it doesn't feel like something I would do. Maybe Tim said it or Hamish and Andy said it or something. Anyways, someone mentioned the fact that I wanted to be on the show.
Right.
Like thinking about it now, like the like who do I think I am? Like asking to be on Rove.
Yeah, I'll be on Rove. I mean, if you want me, Rove, I'll do it, I
Yeah.
guess. Like, I'm
I'm,
pretty
I'm
busy.
happy to be in the writer's room, but like obviously I'd prefer to be on the show, mate. So yeah, so for some reason that was brought up somehow, I, and then I, yeah, and oh, that's right. And then they said, oh, we should do it. Can we do a test? They wanted to sort of test me out to see if I could, I guess, handle myself with Rove at the desk. And so instead of obviously doing that on screen or in the studio, we set up like a fake desk setup in the wardrobe area in the office, like in the production office.
Yeah,
And so
right.
Rove did like a mock interview with me, and I presented the Key Journal hat as a bit of a
Oh,
test, and that went well enough for them to put me on the show. And so then I was on the show, did the Key Journal hat as a Rydeer. So that was why it was Rydeers. And then I had one more, and I did Rydeers one more week. And then I was like, I felt like Rydeers as an idea, I just was, I don't know, I got over it, or I just thought it was a bit, I don't know, cheap or a bit something. And so then it was like, oh, I'll change it up and I'll do Rye Ports. And I felt like that had a bit more scope because I could be a reporter and I could talk about any sort of topic. And then I did that for a few weeks. And then the year was over because that was sort of like near the end of the year when I was on for the first time. So I only did like 4 things in that first little chunk of the last bit of that first year. But in the next year was the year that they kind of turned the show around, I think. Like that's not turned the show around, but that's when they did that huge overhaul. Well, maybe it didn't seem like that to viewers, but it felt like that in the office.
hmm.
It was where they turned it into, instead of it being Rove and Pete and I think and Corinne and Dave, Dave Callan, or maybe that was Dave still there. I'm not sure. Anyway, Corinne. They changed it all up. Corinne left, and they turned it into more of an ensemble supporting cast. So it was, you know, still Rove was the host, obviously, but then there was like this sort of gaggle of regular contributors like Husey and Carrie, and I think Carrie might have been already there doing the news segment,
But
but
there was a point where she just became a member of the cast, and instead of just throwing to her seemingly somewhere else, they started talking to her after she finished her segment. And yeah, I do agree. There was a point with Rove where it became like everyone sits on the couch and Rove sort of throws to them during the show and stuff like
yeah,
that. And that
yeah,
was the golden age of Rove. Like that was the times where I wanted to be on that couch. And
yeah. It's
yeah, I
terrifying.
loved it.
I don't know if
Is
you'd
it
want to be.
really?
It was terrifying. Well, it was
Well,
no. I mean, it was great. I was just so green and so in awe of the people that were around me,
mm,
um, because I grew up. Well, not grew up, but like from, you know, Rove started in '99, and that was my favorite show in 1999 when I was in Year 12. Like that was the show that I loved watching from an
yeah.
Australian point of view. And so yeah, so being on that couch with them, it was, you know, I'm not a naturally, like I don't really love going on panel shows usually because it's so much, every time I jump in I feel like, you know, everyone turns to you and it's like so much pressure on what are you going to say.
Mm.
It's anyway, so that sort of freaked me out a little bit. But I just also want to say with that, the way the show changed in those last 2 years, one of the main reasons that it did, and I don't think he gets enough credit for it, is they brought in a new producer, new series producer, Todd Abbott. Do you know Todd? Todd Abbott? Have
Ah,
you
no, I
him?
don't.
He's the new head of comedy at the ABC.
Okay.
Um, and he's not so. Anyway, he was brought in to be the producer, and his thing was to make it more of an ensemble kind of thing. So that was a lot was down to him, his idea to do that. And so that was when I was like, And then that was unbelievable. Like from my point of view, like I'd gone from like all I'd done was real stories, which was really fun and cool. But at the time, it kind of felt like a bit of a fluke. Like I felt like a bit of a, because I don't know, I still feel like everything I do is a bit of a fluke. But at that time specifically, I felt like we got this show on Channel 10 and it felt like, well, it didn't go that well. It went fine. I'm sure there were comedy people who really liked it, but it wasn't like a breakout hit or anything like that.
Mm.
And and so when that sort of year of Rove came about, when the show changed, and I was asked to be regular cast, so it was like me, Hamish and Andy, Husey, Carrie, Pete, and Rove, and I was at the start of the season like getting press shots done with the cast, like getting the full group shots done and individual shots, and like that was so surreal. And I mean, yeah. I mean, a big kind of like I guess a theme of like many performers is that kind of feeling, which is like that horrible need to be chosen. For someone who's perceptively in like a position of power or authority, when they go like, "Yeah, we think you're good enough," like that is like it's not a it's like a bit of a shameful feeling sometimes, but it is like a good feeling, when someone goes, especially someone you respect, goes, "We choose you." And that was, I got that feeling at Rove, and it gave me this sort of extra level of confidence, which I'd probably never had before.
Yeah.
And then it was just about like, okay, what's the segment? And that's when that investigationing was that segment in that first year. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like stylistic, like, because you certainly have your sort of I guess style of comedy that I feel like is you're a bit of an auteur in that sense, that like there's this almost like very tongue-in-cheek vibe to all of your stuff, particularly like investigationing, where a lot of the comedy in that came from you, not necessarily even the script, but the way you were interacting, like almost like a meta comedy, in the sense that it was the scene transitions and the camera work and you looking in the wrong direction, or like walking past a car and just like continuing your report while like floating across the hood of the car and things like that. Was that always an intentional thing to have that? Because I feel like a lot of your stuff is very meta and self-referential, which I always really loved, because like fourth wall breaking and such is one of my favorite
Same.
comedic devices. And
Yeah.
yeah, and like again, like watching your stuff, I just always thought it's like, I think it's because with particularly with investigationing, it's like the absurdity of the fact that if this was a real guy doing a real journalistic thing, but he was also just getting all the stuff wrong and like falling over and stuff, it would be hilarious. And I think that's what's so funny about it.
Well, like, I mean, so obviously you're a lot younger than me. Do you remember, like, do you ever watch McAuliffe's ABC show, like the McAuliffe program, and did you
Ah,
ever see that?
I
You
did it.
like whatever romanticized feelings that you have about the work that I did on Rove will
Yeah.
be completely squashed when you watch
Okay.
McAuliffe, because all of that stuff I was doing was, maybe not squashed, but like all of that stuff it was me just trying to do what he did,
Mm.
so incredibly well. Yeah, I mean, you will love his ABC show. Like he did, I think, 3 seasons of it.
Okay.
Um, it's called the McAuliffe Program and then the McAuliffe Program, and it's just like it's nonsense done seriously, and it's so good. I mean, that was like my thing, and
Mm.
so all the stuff I was doing on Rove, I was really just heavily influenced by that, and probably like things like Monty Python, which I just watched endlessly as a kid, Faulty Towers, and yeah, whatever shows I guess I was watching back then.
Yeah.
But the thing on Rove the thing that I said that Tim and I stumbled. So I made those segments with Tim Bartley, and the thing that we stumbled across, I remember it so clearly. And I think the other thing that was probably on, I can't remember if it was on at the time, but it must have been on at some point, was Tim and Eric.
Oh yeah.
Tim and Eric. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like Tim and Eric was a huge influence on me as well because I was like, oh god, it was just a level of, um, you relate to this word, a level of punk that was kind of like in their comedy, which was just so, I don't know, rule breaking seems a bit
Mm.
not quite right, but you know what I mean? Like that
Yeah.
they 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 just did anything. And what was the strange thing in that, and this is the thing that I'm even still grappling with now, is because I came up in a commercial TV world where there are like rules that you do have to follow as far as like, it has to, from a quality point of view, it has to look like this. You have to be in like graphic safe. You have to, there's
Mm.
all these things you have to do. And I kind of came up with all those sorts of things to remember. And more now, as I do, especially as I do the stuff I'm doing this year, it's been fun being a bit, but I guess it's a bit more liberating to not have to follow any rules. Like
Yeah.
I don't have to make a video that fits neatly into 3 or 4 minutes because that's when people stop watching after that, according to whatever data,
Mm.
like I think to be able to kind of go like, you know what, I'm just going to make the credits go for 10 minutes because
Mm.
who, it's just me. I'm the only one who's going to really care. So
Yeah, and it
I'll just do
certainly
that.
seems with all the Ryan 11 stuff that there's like it really comes across that there's a creative liberty, and I guess like you're at a point in your career now where you like you can do this and you can do all this stuff that doesn't necessarily or wouldn't necessarily be a mainstream thing, but it's just, do you find that there's like that you love it more because you don't actually have to make it for an audience, or there's there's not necessarily a commercial incentive to any of it, so you just literally do have the free reign to do whatever you want with it?
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely the funness of it is that I don't have to get anyone else over the line. Like I've
Mm.
had, even with the people I've worked closest with, like I remember like even when we were doing our Channel 31 show, Radio Karate, where it's like
Mm.
it's Channel 31, but of course we were 21 or whatever we were, when you're 21, even doing a show on Channel 31 feels like life and death. Like it feels like
Yeah.
everything needs to be perfect.
Sin,
And even,
Sin Radio was like that as well. Like I used
yeah,
to do Sin Radio, and you're like, this does not matter at all. But you anything goes wrong, you're like, oh my god, everyone heard that. Now everyone knows.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. And exactly. And so like even then, like there was this idea that I kept wanting to do, which very likely is a shit idea, but it's like something that I just always wanted to do. But because I had to get other people, and the idea was essentially just me singing a song, like it's a live band setup, and I'm singing, and it's like gets thrown to me as to sing, and I sing a song, but it's all in gibberish, but I sing it really seriously, and it's just gibberish
right.
words, and so it's like, I mean, so silly. And of course, like that could have absolutely bombed. It would have been just such a weird thing to have on any show.
Yeah.
But I think I wasn't like annoyed at the other, like at Hames and Andy or Tim or anything, that they wouldn't want to do it, because it's like, well, that is strange. But what's exciting about this year is like I could do that now,
Mm.
and there isn't any pressure. There's no commercial pressures to have to like get a certain rating or to get a certain amount of views or
Mm.
to grow an audience or to have good social engagement or anything like that. Like all that stuff is necessary in the right context, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's really fun this year for me to have something that is just mine, I guess.
Yeah, and it honestly, man, it's been all of it has just been so amazing. Like I've genuinely looked forward to it, and today's one is amazing as well, and so much fun. So I'm super glad you're doing it, because again, like a lot of my friendship group from school, we all just loved your vids. We loved investigationing. Like I loved that the podcast you did, Ryan Shelton. Is it for 1 minute only, or was it the
For
one?
yeah, for
Yeah,
one
like
minute
you,
only. Yeah.
and that's sort of what I've always loved about you, is just, yeah, you're so like eclectic in the work that you do, and you you make every even Cliff, and I feel like you do so well in every medium. You find a way to toy with that medium or that platform, I guess, whether it's podcast, TV. Cliff was a great example of that, like working within the limitations of at the time. Could you only do like a 1 minute video on Insta or something, or 30 seconds?
15.
15, yeah. So
15,
and I just think you've always been so good with like messing with the conventions of a platform in a way that I hadn't ever seen anyone do, particularly in investigationing. And me and all my high school friends, we used to quote investigationing all the time. We'd put them as our Facebook cover photos and stuff when we were at school.
Unbelievable.
Like, absolutely loved it. And sorry, because there's so much I want to talk to you about. So sorry to kind of jump around a bit. Can we very quickly touch on the fact that you were a writer on Chris Lilly's first show, We Can Be Heroes? And I think you once told me that, were you one of the, like, was Phil Olivetti, who is one of the best Chris Lilly characters, was that sort of, like, were you a big sort of co-create, like, did you sort of foster that character a bit?
No more than, the only thing I probably would have told you is that when we were writing that character, all I could think about was my dad.
Oh,
like it was
really?
like,
Okay.
yeah, it was.
Phil is a father of two who is just a super arrogant and like doesn't know he's arrogant kind of dude.
Well, yeah, and so so the way Phil turned out and the way Chris actually like brought him to life and wrote him out is nothing like my dad.
Yeah, I was gonna say your dad sounds like a dickhead.
No. Yeah, he is. No. My dad's brilliant. But no, it was more just like in the because I was only working on that show at the very early stages. So Chris had already come up with the character names and like what they do but it was more just like I got to help him with the like just the details of different scenes and things they do. And one of the things that just comes to mind was when there's like one scene I think where Phil is, whether it actually made the show on or I can't remember, but where he's got the new hi-fi and he's talking about the speakers.
Oh yeah.
He's talking about the different speakers and he's got the flat screen TV and the different, he's talking about like the new hi-fi system. Like that, like my dad was always an early adopter in the hi-fi world.
Okay.
And that was just a big, but yeah, between like Phil and Jamae, I reckon like were the two characters in that show that I most confidently contributed to because I went to a private school and kind of knew girls who were kind of like that. So like thinking about like school assemblies and things like that, that was, yeah.
Can you so I know that you met Chris through Big Bite. No, sorry, not Big Bite, through Hamish and Andy, which was the Channel 7 show that sort of hijacked Big Bite, and the cast of Big Bite, of which Chris was one, and Andrew.
We don't like to use the word hijacked.
Well, I mean, from what I can tell, it was a pretty blatant hijacking of a show.
Well, not by us, but yeah,
not by you. It was an
unintentional
hijack.
Yeah,
which doesn't happen on planes. Like you never get an accidental hijack of a plane.
No.
Oh, sorry guys, I'll take over.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine that. It's like, oh fuck, I guess we're hijacking the plane now. I did not. I did not mean for this to happen.
Yeah, but here we are. So we might as well. Did you guys want to go to the back and we'll take care of it?
Yeah, and I mean, I've got the gun. I guess. Get out of here. I didn't mean for this to happen. Yeah. But yeah, so exactly. I met Chris there. And that was, I mean, then that was before we'd done, the only thing we'd literally ever done was the Channel 31 show. Yeah. So that was my first paid job in the industry, working on that show as a writer. And I started off working like one day a week as a writer. And then by the, I think like about a week or two before it got cancelled, they pushed me up to 5 days a week writing. And it was like, and I couldn't believe it because whatever I was getting paid a day, getting like paid like a writer, a comedy writer. And especially back then where, I'd gone from like working at a retail store to this, like working at a job that I I didn't hate, but it was like fine.
Yeah.
And then working in like a comedy writers room with people who worked on Fast Forward and Full Frontal, and getting to like write sketches and submit them and get them made. And then they're paying me, like I was getting like $2,000 a week or something ridiculous like that for those couple of weeks before it got, and I couldn't believe it. Like I just thought, this is wild. It's crazy. It was so crazy. And then the show got cancelled. But then we were so green, and we had no idea about anything except for the fact that we'd done one Channel 31 show and then all got jobs. So we're like, fuck, this isn't that hard,
So
actually.
easy, yeah.
And so we just thought, well, let's just get another show, another job. Anyway, it's not as easy as it sounds, but God. But yeah, so in that time, Chris was doing his stuff within that show, and he was sort of his own island within that show. Like he would, unlike everything else, which was like a collaborative thing, understandably, he would just go off and do his own sketches and his own stuff himself and get to make his own things. And then I remember like one day, I remember standing in the Channel 7 building, the old Channel 7 building in South Melbourne, and he was in there, and I he was doing, and I remember having some ideas. I had like some ideas for Mr. G or something, and I remember like being really reluctant to tell him the ideas because I knew that he was his own thing, like, and he didn't use the writers. So I was like, "Hey, I remember just saying, hey, I've got a few from Mr. J. Like, they're probably shit, but they're really dumb, and I hope you don't look at them. But if you do, yeah, whatever." And so he took
what
them.
What if he just goes, "Oh, well, if they're dumb, I definitely don't want to see them." Don't.
Yeah. They're good. They're really good. No, they're good. They're the best ones you've seen this year. Yeah. So, and I have no idea. I can't remember if he ever used them. He probably, but a couple of weeks later, and a few times that I'd spoken to him there, and a few weeks later, he said, "I'm going to this taping of a pilot." Like a friend of his was doing a pilot, and they asked me to come sit in the audience. Do you want to come and watch? Come to the pilot. And I was like, fuck yeah! Like I'm still in the mode of like I get to go to live TV taping. Like that was like still where I was at. Even though I was working on a show, that was like my mindset.
Oh, sorry. When I was at uni, me and a bunch of friends from uni went to sit in on the project, which anyone can do. It's free. But I just remember being like, "Hey guys, went to the project tonight," and like thinking that it was like the best thing ever, and people be like, "What? How'd you get that?" And it's like you just go to the website and press. Like they want people to come. They need an audience.
Yeah. They need it desperately. Yeah, in fact, they're using you for free. Yeah. So he asked me to come to this taping, and I was like a bit nervous or a bit like, oh God, like I guess it's like that thing of like being chosen again by someone who's, and I went along, and then we went to this pilot, and that was all good. And then beforehand, he said, "Hey, I'm not really telling many people yet because it's still pretty early stages, but I'm developing this new show for the ABC, like this thing, and I was wondering if you'd wanted to maybe come and help write on it." I was like
asking someone to the school dance. Yeah, so like I'm doing this thing, and I was wondering. It's probably stupid, but did you want to maybe come and?
Yeah, I mean, he was a lot more confident with asking me than I was in receiving it, but
yeah.
But he just sort of said it like it was. He sort of said it in a way of like, "Hey, do you want to come and write this show with me?" As if he was saying, "Hey, I just got this new video game." That was like the tone of how he asked me to do it, and I was freaking out about it on the inside. But of course I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to," and then went and like met with him and Laura Waters, who and they just started working together because the ABC had paired him up with her. They didn't know each other, and so they got paired together. And I guess they were looking for someone to help with the early stages of development because they probably had development money. And so yeah, they asked me to come and do a little tiny bit of writing, like in the early stages. And that was just the greatest experience. Like still one of the best TV experiences I've ever had, because not only just makes such incredible, beautiful things, but it was also in an environment where he wasn't yet Chris Lilly, so he wasn't yet. There was no pressure on him yet. Like it was just him doing his first show, and no one really knew if it was ever going to get up. So not only did we have like all this freedom in the ABC, but there was nothing to live up to. There was like nothing to lose. So we could have all these ideas, and it was just pure fun. And we're just laughing and writing all these things up, and it's like, oh, this would be funny. And then and then I remember like when I remember there was like one day where we decided, whoever had the idea like decided that Pat should, spoiler alert, Pat should die, at the end of the series. And we were like, oh God, that's so tragic and lovely. Like that's a great, what a nice, that would be cool. And then I remember us or Laura or Chris or someone, I was definitely in the room. I mean, I wouldn't have been saying it, but I was in the room, to the ABC exec and sort of pitching that as part of the thing, saying like, and then we think that Pat then dies at the end of this, battle that she has. And they push back on it so hard. And they're like, no, people were going to love Pat. You can't kill her. And I remember it being like a real, like stand your ground moment, like not from my point of view, but from Chris's point of view. And I remember feeling like, oh, this could, if you give on this, like so many other things could follow. And clearly he didn't give in on it. And it's just made for such a better show and probably a better body of work that he's made, and a more like influential and just good. It's just made for a much better, richer.
Yeah. And I agree. Like you see that Chris is quite good with those kind of moments. Like there's this incredible moment in Angry Boys where the character Gran, who up until this point is, quite a reckless character, quite, brazen and offensive and ignorant. And then there's this really, really almost out of nowhere scene in one of the few episodes where she reveals to one of the prison inmates, because she works at the prison, she reveals that she has Alzheimer's, right? And it's quite a jarring moment in an otherwise pretty like in your face show, and it's a really beautiful moment, and it's so well performed. And I think like moments like Pat dying and We Can Be Heroes, or that moment in Angry Boys, I've always really remembered as being really poignant moments of an otherwise quite out there show. So I think those moments are really good, and you're right, they do add just so much more depth and so much more meaning to the comedy, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's like real. There are moments of like many moments of like real social commentary in his stuff. Like even just, I think a couple of days ago, I saw that he put a photo up of Jonah, like this sort of like press shot or a shot of Jonah, like as if like Jonah's been arrested, like with the lineup height thing behind him. And it's like, and Jonah's, it's like the most incredible, powerful photo, because Jonah's eyes are like kind of welling up, and like, it's like he's been crying. And it's just really, I mean, he's like, it's always weird when you say this about friends, like we're good friends, but he is a very special performer, and creator and writer. I mean, he's had more than his due of respect, but it's like, it's really, it's just worth, it's easy to forget that, but he has really made some pretty amazing stuff that has, and I know for a fact has changed a lot of people's lives. It's pretty cool.
With your stuff as well, there was a show that you did this year in the midst of quarantine at home alone together. At home alone together, which was was it Ray Martin who was hosting?
Big time, mate.
Ray
Martin.
And you did this incredible series of like each episode it was you and your twin brother Jason Shelton, and I think like you really do that you have this great character in the Aussie kind of bloody larrikin dude that Jason Shelton really was, which I thought was really great. What was like the mindset behind that storyline or that little story arc? Because I actually genuinely would love to see the Jason and Ryan Shelton show. Like, I just thought it was so good and just amazing.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I do love playing that type of a guy. I've probably done like 4 different versions of that character, in different
Not
formats.
not the least of which as well, one of my favorites of yours, which is the black
Oh,
beret, the
yeah,
beret
beret
and a bit
bloke.
of
Yeah,
lippy guy,
yeah,
which is you using one of the. You need to bring that back. You using one of the Instagram filters of a beret and lipstick and being a larrikin Aussie bloke.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So good.
There's just something about like I just love those, and it's an affectionate. Like I love those guys. Like more often than not, like they're just, you know, if they've got a good heart, like obviously there are the really like misogynist, racist versions of that guy, but the ones like I feel like Beret bloke and even Jason to a certain extent, they're still like they're harmless. They're harmless and you kind of like I want them at my party. Like I want that guy there because it's like there's full of unpredictability with those guys and fun and even though they're into like ribbing and like kind of a little bit of teasing, I feel like they can usually take it as much as they give it. Like it's sort of part of their fabric. So I just love those guys. And so with doing that show, when they asked me to do that show, like and this sort of comes back to like what I love about like the beauty of a constraint and probably even what you were talking about before with like the 1-minute podcast or the 15-second Instagram stuff. It's like a clear constraint, whether it's like enforced upon you or you've put it upon yourself, is like it's like the greatest motivator for me. I love that. And so with this show, the constraint was I have to film everything here, like at my house. Like that's the idea of the show. And I'm only allowed to I can't really have any other actors, at least at the start of the show, we couldn't have other actors in there. Or we could actually, but because I was out in the country, I didn't have access to anyone else. So that was a constraint. And then also, we could only have one crew member. So one crew member came out to film it, but that was it. So that were the constraints. And I kind of felt like if it was going to be just me performing to camera, I felt like there's a pretty low ceiling on how much you can really do. That at least it's going to sustain for 8 episodes because it's like it could be good for 1 or 2. Like you could do some fun like kind of reporting type things, but not being able to interact with anyone is going to get a bit boring. And so that was like, well, I need another character. And I was like, and then I came up with this idea of, well, I'll be the gardener DIY guy. Well, Jason will be, and yeah, it was weird because like Dan Neely, because the show told me I wanted to do it. Like, yeah, that'd be fun. And it really came pretty quickly. And I was like, oh, what about if I did this and this? And then there's this like my brother, and I'm talking to my twin brother, and I'm producing my twin brother. And it was it was a hard show to make because I offered to edit my own segments as well because I just started editing for the webs for Ryan.com for the website. I just sort of figured out editing. I'd been learning for like unconsciously learning, I guess, for years, like looking over editors' shoulders. And I could write, I just perform it and then edit it, and then I literally deliver the finished product, and that was that. And it was just the best fun. Fun.
Well, just one thing I thought of, and we're nearly done here, man. But I love how it's very unusual for 2 identical twins to have such opposing personalities in the way that you and Jason do. Like most of the time, identical twins are pretty similar people, whereas you and Jason are just like total opposites in every way.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, like, yeah, it was. I mean, the me character, the Ryan character, and this was kind of like I was just listening to Have you heard of that new podcast, Shameless? Have you heard of Shameless?
Yeah,
There's this new
it's not a new pod. Oh,
not,
right.
no, not Not Shameless. Sorry, I said the wrong one. Smartless.
Oh, right, because Shameless is
Shameless is
a
a big podcast.
incredibly successful and great podcast by Michelle and Zara.
Love those girls.
Who
Yes.
do great work. I've not heard of Smartless.
Smartless is Will Arnett, Jason Bateman, and Sean Hayes.
Yes.
And they do this podcast. Anyway, I was listening to the latest one, and Ricky Gervais is on, and Ricky Gervais is talking about, well, they're actually all talking about this idea of how things become a lot funnier when you can see another character's reaction. And before The Office, that wasn't, like, now it's a pretty normal thing. Like, now it's, because of The Office, it's quite a normal thing that sitcoms do. You know, cut to the reaction of another character going like, "Oh my God, this is so weird." Like the voice of the audience. But if you think about it, before that, other than like the really good ones like Seinfeld or whatever, most traditional sitcoms, people would say funny, weird things, but it would be kind of treated as if it was normal. This is what Ricky Gervais is saying.
Yes,
and Jason Bateman was saying that when they were coming up with Arrested Development and Mitchell Hurwitz was sort of doing that pilot and it wasn't quite working, he was like, "Oh, it's just not quite right. Something's not right about it." And he realized that he needed to be going to Michael's reactions more. And as soon as he figured that out, he's like, "Oh, now it's funny because now we know that after Tobias does that weird thing and Michael's just watching him like, what the fuck's going on?" Then it's like, then you get the context of, oh, that is weird in this world. Even though that's weird, we're still in the real world. And I think maybe that was, I didn't even think about it at the time, but maybe that's what was helpful with Ryan and Jason, is that you always had Ryan kind of like saying, "No, this is not worthy of television. You know, you can't do this, you know."
Absolutely. And I think that's actually why I love the mockumentary genre so much, because even like, if you look at something like, I don't know if you've watched Modern Family, but that's a mockumentary as well in the vein of The Office. And I loved the first few seasons of that show. Just incredible writing. And the moments where someone does or says something really wacky or stupid, and then another character just in the background looks at the camera, and it's like that acknowledging of the fourth wall, so that the characters are looking at the camera like, yeah, that's, what the hell? Like, can you believe that? I really, really love that. And then to that point as well, that you just kind of reminded me of something else, which is in The Simpsons. Are you a Simpsons fan?
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, I don't dislike it, but I don't know it like you and Jack know it. I don't. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna say it anyway, man. So
cool. I'll tune out.
There's a character in The Simpsons, like a secondary, like a side character. He's named Superintendent Chalmers, and a lot of the fun of Superintendent Chalmers, he's the superintendent of the school. He comes to the school, and Principal Skinner, who's the principal, is there, and the school's just chaos, and so much stuff is happening. And one of the writers of The Simpsons said that Superintendent Chalmers is one of the only characters in Springfield who acknowledges and like responds to the absurdity of everything that's happening around him. Like, and there's this great scene where Principal Skinner goes to Superintendent Chalmers, "Oh, look, there's Lumpy, the school snake." And then this big snake that clearly has children inside it slithers by, and Superintendent Chalmers is just looking at him and totally like knows what's going on. But like, just stuff like that, which I think is sort of similar to, you know, having that character that's grounded in reality to all the absurdity that's hanging on is a really great comedic device, I think.
Yeah, I mean, even like Modern Family, I guess, like, I can only imagine that show was commissioned because of The American Office.
Yeah.
Like, and so you wouldn't have got Modern Family without the British Office, and those sorts of reactive shots and the mockumentary thing. Like, the whole mockumentary thing was not invented by Ricky Gervais and Steve Merchant, but they definitely brought it back, you know, and made it kind of cool again.
Yeah. I always end this with one final thing, and I'm gonna amend it a little bit, but for listeners of this to take away, what is one book, album, and I usually say movie, but let's say visual medium, so TV, movie, whatever, that you think that everybody should watch, read, and listen to?
Oh my God. Fuck.
Fuck, mate.
Uh, well, book. This book will not resonate with everyone, but this book, without being dramatic about it, pretty much changed my life. It's called The Courage to be Disliked.
I've
So,
read it. Great
you've
book.
read it? Yep.
Yeah.
So I'll say that as the book.
Japanese philosopher there, and it's presented as a conversation between a philosopher and a student, and it's a really really good read. Also, quite an easy read. So
Yeah, it is. It is an
yeah.
easy read. Yeah, yeah. It is really, yeah. So that's the book. The
Nice.
an
Can
album.
you just speak a bit? Sorry to interrupt. Could you just
Mm.
speak a bit as to what you got out of that book?
Well, it was just sort of like, and I think I probably just read it at the right time. You know, certain books or shows or films or whatever songs, just you consume them at just the right time, and they have a certain impact that maybe they wouldn't have had if you came across it 5 years earlier. So
Yeah.
this particular book, I was in a place where I was like trying to kind of figure out what what's it all about, like
Yeah.
like life, like
Yeah.
what am I really doing? And that was, before I read that, I was still on this path of like, I've got to have my own TV show, got to have my own TV show.
Mm.
And then I read that and a few other things, like also, another book that I'll say, I know this is two books, but I'm cheating,
Yeah. Yeah.
is I think it's called The Intent to Act or
Okay.
something like that. It's
Yeah.
Larry Moss's book. Even if you don't read the book, this is it's a little quick podcast recommendation. But Larry Moss being interviewed on a podcast called Industry Standard with Barry Katz.
Hmm.
It's a two-part interview, and Larry Moss is a really well-known acting teacher in LA or in New York or something. So he's an acting teacher, but it goes beyond acting. You don't have to be an actor or want to be an actor to get something out of it. He's just so, I love what he talks about as far as like what's important, and to do the work and forget about awards and all that sort of stuff. So essentially, Courage to be Disliked, I was reading that, and it's the first time I've ever read something where it's like, oh my God, it was like a blueprint. It was like a blueprint for how I wanted to live my life, not from a work point of view, but just from like a human on this planet point of view. It just, as the way it laid it out, and it's all based on this psychologist called Alfred Adler, and it's just magic, and it just sort of made me realize that, okay, well, I want, and I forget how I exactly got to this, but as a result of reading that book, I was in a Japanese restaurant one night and with Jam, my girlfriend, and I was like, okay, well, what do I actually want out of life? Like, what's the thing that I want? What am I, I'm working so hard. I'm pitching all these shows. Um, I desperately want to get this TV show up. And then I sort of started thinking like, well, what do I really want out of it? What do I really want out of it? And then when I sort of thought about it, I was like, okay, well, if I'm honest with myself, what I actually want, and it sounds weird to say it out loud because it's just very conceited and shameful, I guess. But it's like, I want people, and this is not what I think is possible, but this is just what I wanted at the time, is I want people to think that I'm the funniest man in the world, and I want to have the most successful TV show that's ever been made. This is best case scenario, and I want to like be on the stage at the Emmys being presented with like Comedy of the Year and be
So
on the
you,
front of,
so you want to be Jerry Seinfeld?
pretty much, like seriously,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
not that I
Well,
thought
we've
that
all
that was
been there.
possible. Yeah, but not that I thought that that was actually going to happen or it was
Yeah.
possible,
Yeah.
but that's what all of my that's what I was leading. That's what I was trying to get to.
Gotcha.
Um, and so then I sort of thought, well, if I'm doing all this work and spending so much of my life trying to get to that, I better make sure that I actually am going to be happy once I get there. And so then I sort of had this moment where I was like, okay, well, and I visualized having all those things. Like I actually stopped and consciously thought about being on the stage at the Emmys, hanging around Will Ferrell and all these people, and they're all coming up to me going, man, your show is unbelievable. You are a genius. Like all these people saying that. That's what I was. And so I visualized that. And I was like, okay, well, I've got it. It's happened. all the things that I dreamed of happened. How do I feel about that? And I was like, I honestly felt like I don't really care. Like I just didn't really, I don't know, I just didn't really care about it. Because my immediate thought was like, okay, well now I'm there. Now I have to maintain it. Now I have to get up tomorrow morning, and then what's next? How do I
Mm,
stay at that level? And
mm,
then I'm already stressed about that. I'm like, oh fuck, now I have to sort of figure out a way to like make another show that's as good. Otherwise I'll fall down the mountain. And I love it up here. I don't want to fall down. So I realized it's like I could get to that, even if I ever get to that place, which is so unlikely. But even if I got there, it's not going to make me happy. So that was like a huge sort of realization, a huge moment of like, whoa, I think I'm chasing the wrong thing here. And that sort of caused me to sort of do this pretty big shift, and did a bit of like work, started seeing a psychologist, um, started speaking to a few different people about it, and just started thinking differently and changed the way I approached what I did, and eventually just tried to approach it more with the intention of focusing on purpose as opposed to product. And I'm not purpose, process, sorry. I have a purpose, but also prioritize process over product, because it was sort of this realization of like, God, well, process, if you spend 3 years on a film, making a film, and the film's shit, or it's shit, or it's good, but no one watches it, it just doesn't, no one sees it. If those 3 years were hell, but you were just thinking, that's okay, I'm just going to get through these 3 years. I know it's shit. I hate the people I work with. I hate everything that I'm doing. I hate where I'm working. I hate the script, blah, blah, blah. But I think the film could be good if I just get through all this. That's what most people do. But really, at the end of the day, you have very little control over whether that film is going to be good or whether it's going to be received how you like it. But even if it does do all those sort of things, it doesn't necessarily mean you can be happy. So what I've sort of shifted to, or trying to shift to, and it's still really challenging,
mm.
is to go like, yes, I want to make a good film, but what's more important than the film is making sure those 3 years making it is really fun. Like
Yeah,
that's the most important bit.
gotcha.
And because the 3 years, that's your life. Film is like a couple of weeks at best,
Mm, mm.
and then
So
people
it's
forget about it.
yeah. So it's not about the output; it's about the process of and the memory making and the fun you have. Because you're right. Like, if the whole time you're working on something is shit, and then you hate it, and you look back on it with no fond memories, then yeah, you're right. Like, I agree that it's more important to enjoy the time rather than the output. And that's
Yeah.
awesome, man. That was actually really really cool to listen to, and I
That's
appreciate you
good.
being so open and stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and it's also not to say that, I don't want to make good work. I still want to make good
Mm.
things, and that's still really important to me. But it's not. I'm not willing to sacrifice the process to get it now.
Yeah. Um, well, thank you for that. That was that's a great place to wrap it. But did you want to do the album and the movie as well?
Well, I feel like I need to. It's not really complete otherwise. Okay, so album, albums are a really hard one. I mean, there's one song
Yeah, sure.
that is like one song, which is the song that I always that kind of revs me up
Mm.
and just reminds me of what's important. Is um, Mama Cass from Mamas and the Papas.
Oh, cool.
There's a song called "Make Your Own Kind of Music,"
Okay.
and that is very very good.
Are the are the mamas and the papas? Do they do California Dreamin'?
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
California. Yeah. Okay.
Yes,
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Mama Cass is the sort of one
She's
of the people.
she's the
Yeah,
mama, I
she's the
assume.
mama. Yeah, yeah, she's the mama. And I don't really know much about her really at all, or I don't know much about Mamas and Papas. Not like a huge fan, but that song just resonates with me so deeply.
Cool.
It's pretty great. And then what was the third
Let's
one?
say
Oh yeah,
movie or TV show.
that everyone needs. Well, I mean, I feel like most people would have seen The Truman Show,
Oh,
but
great film.
But the Truman Show, I think, is one of the great. I mean, God, I feel like Jim Carrey will feature pretty heavily in anything I list, but like that, or like even Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty spectacular.
I mean, Sorry, I was just going to say the Truman Show is such an incredible film in terms of, narrative and performance and comedy and philosophy. Like, that's definitely one of my favorite films of all time. I think it's so amazing.
It is, and I was like, we went and like before the pandemic, we went on a holiday and stayed in this Airbnb, and it was one of those places that had a DVD player and DVDs at the front desk, and they had a collector's edition of the Truman Show at the front desk, and I'd never seen it. It had like a second disc of special features, and there were all these special features and like documentaries about the making of that film that I had no idea about, and it's pretty amazing how prophetic that show actually was in so many ways.
Well, man, this has been so much fun, and I
loved it.
Thanks, man. You have an open invitation to come on this podcast whenever you want. I feel like there's still so much stuff that I would love to talk to you about.
Yeah, I love
man.
it. Yeah.
Cool. And just because I'd love for this to be on the record, you genuinely have been such an influence to me and my idea of what is funny. And I know for a fact that there are like so many people that have gotten so much joy out of your work. And yeah, you're an enormous influence to me, and it's an absolute honor to have had you to have this conversation with you today. So thank you so much. And also just working with you over the last few years, because I've been able to do a bit with Radio Karate and a bunch of the Hamish and Andy shows and stuff. It's been an absolute pleasure, and you guys and your team have been so welcoming, and it's honestly been a dream come true for me, and I just wanted that to be on the record. So thanks, man. That's it, man. I don't know.
That is so. That really means the world. Thanks, Mike. That's so nice. Thanks for saying that. It's really, it does mean a lot. So thank you for saying that. That's awesome.
Awesome, man. We're done. This podcast was a Radio Mike original production. Head to radiomike.com.au to check out all our other content, stay up to date at radio.mike on Instagram, and get in touch, radiomikepod@gmail.com.